Yo, what's good YouTube? It's boardzy, and this is going to be a dual review. Yes, this is going to be a review of the glass skates for the Superlight made by Lethal Gaming Gear, along with the new slim paracord cables from Lethal Gaming Gear. I'll talk about the cables towards the end of the video, and yeah, now I'm going to talk about the glass. So this has been a heavily requested video based on my comments these past few months, and I've been using these skates for a while because it's the first non-PTFE mouse skates that I have actually enjoyed. I've tried all sorts of ceramic feet and the Pulsar Superglides, and I can say with confidence, at least for me, that the Lethal skates are easily the best non-PTFE feet that I have used. They have not worn down at all with glass, especially if you're using it on non-glass mouse pads. I would not recommend using glass on glass. You will basically be able to use these forever. They've been extremely consistent in the few months that I've used them, and I can only presume that over time these things really won't wear down. You can see that these are clear, so they do have a interesting look to them. I don't really care what they look like since the mouse, like I'm not looking at the bottom of the mouse when I'm swiping it around. I think in the future they will have solid color options, but the ones I've used have been clear and you can just see what they look like. However, they are perfectly smooth to the touch, like no scratches, no issues at all. And unlike a glass mouse pad, if you swipe over some dust with glass skates, it does not ruin the experience of the glide, which is something I enjoyed because when I first started using these, that was a concern. I was like, if there's dust on my pad, will it ruin the glide? The answer is no. But next thing I want to talk about is the thickness of these. They are 0.85 millimeters thick, which is on the thicker side for mouse skates, but there's absolutely no issues with the LOD of the Hero sensor on any pad that I've tried, and the input just feels great, really smooth. So yeah, no issues with the LOD or the thickness of these glass skates, which is very good. The implementation of these has been perfect. They were really easy to install. But since this is a Logitech mouse, I have to give this reminder. When you are removing the original skates, if you're swapping off the stock skates, make sure you can see the screws on the bottom of the mouse. If you just see a black layer, you have to remove that as well, or you will have LOD issues, just the way Logitech stock feet work, but I have to mention that. And the reason I'm talking about these things that may seem minor before getting into the glide and comparisons to other types of mouse skates is because I think when you're paying $20 for a set of mouse skates that in theory you want to last forever, you want it to be the highest quality possible, and I think that it really checks all the boxes. You can see that it really perfectly fits into the slot for the skates. So the tolerances seem really good, at least on my copy. The rounded edges are solid. There's not really any dragging feeling. But yeah, now I'll get to how these feet actually play and compare them to PTFE and the Pulsar Superglide skates. So first thing I want to mention is that these have very low initial friction, but they maintain a controlled glide. Like you can see in the glide test that core pads are actually going to look like they have more glide to them, and they will play faster, presuming you're putting around the same amount of pressure with both mice. So if you assumed that these are like uncontrollably fast just because they're glass, it's really not the case, and these are in some cases more controlled than PTFE is going to be, and they are, I will say, the only type of non-PTFE skates that actually feels good and passable on control surfaces. This is the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn. I use the Artisan Zero a lot, and the glide is honestly very good on these, and it feels more like an alternative to PTFE than any sort of glass skate that I had previously used. But it makes for a unique experience since you still have the lower initial friction from the glass skates, which stays even on slower pads. There were some pads, though, like the X10 Control, Lethal Gaming Gear Jupiter, Vaxi PA, and the G640 that I just found to be too slow and not really enjoyable to use. The experience would be faster on those smoothed out cloth pads with something like Tiger Ice, to be honest. And yeah, I just didn't think the glass paired well with those pads. In my opinion, it was best with textured pads like the Lethal Gaming Gear Venus, MPC 450, Hien, Hayate Otsu, the list goes on. But yeah, more textured hybrid pads, if that's what you like to call them. Compared to PTFE on these faster types of pads, it feels a bit more effortless to get the mouse in motion, and you sort of lightly graze the texture. With PTFE, you can really feel the texture of the mouse pads, and they can feel rough. Mouse pads will never feel rough with the glass skates, basically. So if you found something like the Razer Strider or the Hien to be too rough and textured on the mouse skates, glass skates could actually fix that issue. Now I'll compare the Lethal Glass skates to the Superglides skates. So for one, both of these have extremely low initial friction. They share that characteristic, but the differences are the actual feedback on the mousepad. With the Superglides, it almost feels like you're floating on the mousepad. There's not really any feedback of the texture of the mousepad. They're also quieter than the Lethal skates. So when you put in pressure with the Lethal skates, the mousepad doesn't really slow down as much, which is what I've been saying, like a very consistent all-around feeling. But even on a mousepad where there's not much give to it, there will still be a major slowdown once you start putting pressure in. So like if you're a fucking palm monkey gripper, I could not imagine that is very enjoyable, and it won't feel as fast as if you lightly like fingertip the mouse. So the pressure you put into the Superglides makes more of a difference than on the Lethal skates. The Superglide seems to drag a bit more when switching directions. I'm not sure if this is the cause of the issue, but I did notice the bottom mouse skate doesn't line up perfectly in the slot for it, so I'm gonna do a more detailed review of the Superglides once I get the models that Pulsar are making for different mice, so I have a bit more to talk about. But yeah, for now, I definitely prefer the Lethal skates. I just realized people will probably ask if the weight gets increased, and you can see with the puck on, the GPX weighs 63 grams, so I think they added maybe 1 gram, really nothing to worry about at all. And overall, I think these skates are great, which surprised me because, like I said, I've never really been a fan of or recommended any type of non-PTFE skates before. I do think there's an adjustment period, but it will be a generally easy adjustment, especially if you're used to core pads or Tiger Ice. Anything fast like that, because there's honestly nothing extreme about these skates aside from the lower initial friction, which I think if you play something tracking heavier where you're moving your mouse a ton like Fortnite, you will get used to and just enjoy. Will it turn a horrible aimer into a god tier aimer? Absolutely not, but it's just another option. These will last you forever, and I'm personally going to be keeping them on my GPX. So I will give the glass skates for the GPX the seal of approval. Since these are high quality and also good for performance, I don't have many complaints about them. They're the first glass skates that I've actually wanted to continue using, and easily if you've tried Ceramic Fee and been like, wow, these suck on non-plastic mouse pads, this is completely different, and yeah, I'm looking forward to when they have compatibility with even more mice. But yeah, that's all for the glass skate part of the video. Very solid option, but not a complete necessity, really. Not life-changing stuff. But yeah, now on to the Lethal cables. I have them for the XM1R, and this is a slightly older prototype version for the Zowie S2C. You can see with these cables that they are extremely thin. I brought out the Viper Mini so you can see a little comparison. The Viper Mini cable is a lot thicker, and also when you do a little test of cable flexibility, you can see the Viper Mini moves while the XM1R does not move under any circumstances. So this is a thin and flexible cable. One thing to note, this does not fit in the Lunar Dial mouse bungee. I bought the Razer V3 bungee, and as far as I know, this is the only bungee compatible with these cables. As you can see, the cables come with a little black adapter that does allow you to put the cables in any traditional bungee. So if you have the lunar dial, or I don't even know, the Zowie bungee, this is your option, and then the cable will stay in there. But if you don't use the adapter, the cable literally doesn't even sit in the bungee and will just come right out when you swipe the mouse. So I would recommend using the provided adapter or get the Razer V3 bungee. Installing these cables is incredibly easy because they do come with a 3D printed stress relief. So literally all you have to do is open the mouse up, pull out the old cable, plug in this new cable, and then just put the stress relief back in the front and close the mouse. Even if you've never opened up a mouse before, I think you could easily install this cable. It's simply just swapping a cable out. You don't have to burn the heat shrink as you used to. But yeah, the price for this is $25. You receive a high quality, very good, flexible, slim cable, but is it really necessary on mice like the XM1R and Zowie C series that already have good stock cables? I would say no. At least for me, these stock cables feel good enough in a bungee to the point I wouldn't need to do an aftermarket mod. But having these cables, there's no denying that they are better than the stock cable. And I will say in the case of the Zowie C series, you can feel the cable being lighter than the stock cable, but it's nothing that is, once again, really life-changing. It's also worth mentioning that these are basically the only paracords available in the United States now. Almost every company is either out of stock or shut down. So when there is compatibility for more mice, I'm looking forward to Vaxi and the Viper Mini. These lethal cables will definitely be extremely viable. These are easily the lightest cables I have ever used. It's just insane. It doesn't feel like I'm holding anything right now. And despite that, the cable really will never get under your mouse, which is a complaint that some people had with paracords. But yeah, overall, Lethal Gaming Gear has always been kind of ahead of the game with paracords, and this is no different. So if you're looking for a paracord in the US, I would say this is your go-to option once they make the cables for the mouse you are looking for. But yeah, on the XM1R and the Zowie S2C, these cables have been great. I would obviously never go back to the stock cable once I've made this upgrade, and overall they've just been solid to use. Not sure if I missed anything about the cables. Let me know. It feels like this video has been going on forever now. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this sort of longer look at some cool shit that Lethal Gaming Gear is putting out. That's all for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And yeah, you can use code boardzy to save on these items. I don't really like shoving my code down people's throats, but yeah, you can save like 5%.